There's something I want to tell you about the stress and how we have to look at stress, okay? And I think it's an important thing because uh, many people have told me from my lectures it's the one thing they remember, okay? I was sitting in a dentist's office and looked at an article that said, how do lobsters grow? Well, I don't care how lobsters grow. But I was interested in it. And it points out that a lobster is a soft, mushy animal that lives inside of a rigid shell. That rigid shell does not expand. Well, how can the lobster grow? Well, as the lobster grows, that shell becomes very confining. Right? And the lobster feels itself under pressure and uncomfortable. It goes under a rock formation to protect itself from predatory fish, casts off the shell, and produces a new one. Well, eventually, that shell becomes very uncomfortable as it grows, right? Back under the rocks. Good. And the lobster repeats this numerous times. The stimulus for the lobster to be able to grow is that it feels uncomfortable. Right? Now, if lobsters had doctors, they would never grow. Because as soon as the lobster feels uncomfortable, goes to the doctor, gets a Valium, gets a Percocet, feels fine, never gets off its shell. So I think that we have to realize that times of stress are also times that are signals for growth. And if we use adversity properly, we can grow through adversity.
You mentioned earlier about the distress and that discomfort, um, kind of pushing you in a certain way. Do you kind of want to lead us off on that train of thought since that kind of came up organically?
Yeah, definitely. That was great. Yeah, when you said Jerry, I was looking to see if my mom was yelling for me or something. But Christian names are fine. Hey, so no, so Mario's talking about this thing he shared. It was sort of like a graph of there's good stress out there, and there's also bad stress. There's too much stress. There's just enough to get you to get motivated to make a change for the positive. So I was, thinking about the lobster scenario, metaphor for growth. You feel some discomfort that, stirs up some drive to go off and, be vulnerable and grow, right? And so that makes sense to me. But my thought was the last couple days was, what if you feel that discomfort, but you don't go off and cast your shell that's not working for you and find a way to be vulnerable and find a way to grow? What if you just instead dealt with the pain and discomfort? And that's really where I ended. There was a lot of people that are doing that right now. They're just dealing with the pain, dealing with the discomfort in a way that may be not healthy or lead to growth. Um, you know, Self-medicating is one. There's all kinds of psychological mechanisms that you can try to, shift the blame to somebody else, or, just drink yourself stupid until you don't feel the pain anymore, and then you're back in your same shell, and tomorrow's the same day. So my question was, how do you take somebody from a place where that's a destructive reaction to discomfort to a positive where it's growth? And then when Mario shared this thing was like, what is the optimal strength factor? And maybe we can show that slide at the end, but it was all about support. And I thought, there it is. That's it, support. So if you're struggling to grow, like this lobster naturally just feels stress and goes off and grows, right? Well, we're not going to do that. We need more. Support is a really important piece, I think, and peer support like this group and others like it can help us to encourage each other to go and do something positive, or to notice a signal and say, hey man, you've kind of been hitting the bottle a lot lately, and it's affecting work, and it's affecting your relationships. Can we talk? Got something on your mind? Let's talk and see what we can do about it. And that's support, and maybe that's what helps bring that person out of, I'm going to deal with the pain only, and change their mindset to, yeah, let me try something positive. Let's go for a walk and talk. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mario. That was just what I was looking for. The big question was, what if it doesn't work? What if you can't grow? So I'll throw that out to the group and stop talking.
Wilson or PJ or Paul or whoever anybody here knows me. I think that's true you have to find that place. And it wasn't really emphasized as much in this video, but one of the key parts from that rabbi video was he talks a lot about shedding the shell, and that discomfort is that signal for growth. But he also kind of went over that lobster goes under a big rock to protect itself from predators while it's doing this. And that's that seeking a safe place. And that safe place is critical to the process. So they need to have that security, that feeling that this is somewhere where they can shed that outer covering that's holding them in to grow back. And without that security, also the growth is not possible. So it's both the discomfort signaling that it's necessary, and the security that you do have a place to do that in. And you were talking about that feeling of trying to self-medicate and stuff like that. Something that I've heard before from other counselors, and yes, I've been to other counselors before, and it was very visual to me and really hit, is the idea of white knuckling it. And that really hit in my mind, is like, because that's that image of you're really holding on, and you're gonna just white knuckle through the stress or whatever is going on, and that's just not gonna cut it. Eventually you'll lose that grip and you'll fail. So you need to find that security, that place where you feel comfortable to shed that discomfort and grow again. So that's mine, and I'll throw that out to the group.
The key is that lobster finding a rock or a place to be protected while it's vulnerable, so that it can find a new shell. With you having gone through everything that you have, now you're out of the military and life looks something different for you. Can you look at the last couple of years and think, this is when I was casting off a shell, and this is what a rock may have looked like to me at some point in my life during this transition, whether it was a place, a person, a group of people, because I think that's important. Paul, you brought up a great point. But what are those? We know what a rock looks like to a lobster, but in our lives in COVID right now, whether we're still in the military or out, what does that rock look like? What does it look like to you, Jeremy?
So I think that rock could look a lot of different ways for different people. But I would just say that in my particular situation, my rock was that support group that Gerbo was talking about. That was probably the most effective group of people in my corner to kind of push me past my level of comfort. So whenever I was transitioning out of the military, I was doing intern work. So I was up there for a while, and that was seeming like a pretty promising gig. And then during the course of all that, another opportunity came up, right? And it was kind of a new and exciting opportunity that I didn't know existed. So as I transitioned away from that, there was a lot of fear of, am I walking away from something that's already a solid gig? So there was a lot of risk involved in that, right? Because once I walked away from that, I'm probably not going to be coming back into that. And to be honest with you, that was a very scary place. And my rock in that particular situation could have been staying there and not going, to seek out this other opportunity. So I think one of the key extracts from that story is that rock should be a temporary thing, right? That's our temporary place until that new shell is developed. And I think in regards to post-traumatic growth, I think people tend to come back and not want to take risks, whatever that risk looks like to them. So maybe that risk is going to a mall or a crowded place, right? And a lot of people just avoid that, and they hide in their rock, which would be their house, or a familiar place. So I think what has served me best is to, in some way, like the video is talking about, in some way become uncomfortable and kind of put myself out there and be vulnerable and accept a little bit of risk in order to grow. And in my particular situation, I could say that taking those risks served me well.
Now that you have hindsight and you've gotten through the storm, if you will, you're able to look back at it a little bit more objectively and see the mistakes and where you learned and where you grew from. Probably wasn't the prettiest process in the world, I'm assuming, right?
Is life ever perfect? I mean, that's just, life in general. We're imperfect beings. Gerbo wrote me once, this was years ago, and you said something to me in an email that kind of resonated with me for a long time, and that is that we're flawed at the molecular level. I forget what it was in regards to, maybe while I was at NCOA or something like that. I reached out to you, asking you some questions. But yeah, we're not perfect. Of course, I can look back and say, and second guess the decisions that I made, and wish that I had done it a different way. But I try to find gratitude in where I'm at now, and try to say, oh, okay, well, if I hadn't made this mistake, it wouldn't have brought me to where I currently am right now. And I'm actually very grateful to be where I am right now. So sometimes those mistakes, although they can sting in a certain moment, they could be wrapped up as blessings in disguise later on.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that. Chris, welcome. Wanted to hear kind of what you had to what your takeaway from the lobster video is, or some of the things we'll be talking about, as far as the importance of good, healthy stress. Oh, look at the baby. Sorry. Some of the positive effects of stress. Obviously, the stress of you if you don't get up for work that day or do something, that you may not have a job if you don't keep showing up. But when stress goes a little bit too far, what are some of the takeaways you got from the lobster video? And I don't know, just love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, man. So like I'm under that rock now, right? So I had a super cool guy job going overseas 6 months out of the year, and training with bomb squads and doing some awesome stuff, right? And when COVID rolled around, it got shut down cold. So I personally have not worked since January, right? So I had to find something else. I came into this group because I was suffering from depression because I lost a purpose and I didn't have a purpose, right? And I needed that support. And so you guys kind of talked me into kind of shifting it and doing the kind of taking veterans fishing thing. And I'm shedding a shell, man. I'm going from being a bomb tech to being a boat captain now. And it's freaking crazy, right? I mean, this is a dude that lived in Arizona for almost 30 years in the desert. And now I'm out running 5 trips in a 10-day period, all kinds of folks on the boat, from combat medics to EOD techs to, pilots, Air Force B-1 pilots. And it's scary, because I miss doing what I was doing. I miss my fellows overseas. My guys in the Philippines just got hit with 2 suicide bombers on the same day that were attacking them. And I had one of my guys that got hurt real bad, and I wish I could get over there, but that's not happening for me, right? So doing something completely different. I wore a uniform for 30 years, and now, sitting on a boat in shorts and a sun shirt, it's a lot different, but it's been good. It's been healthy. But what resonated me with the video was definitely the idea that it is painful, right? It hurts, especially when it's forced, when it's not like I hit my 20 and I'm out. It's when it's kind of taken from you, like we talked about in previous conversations. But finding that new life, finding that new shell or skeleton to sit in, I mean, sometimes it's more rewarding than just keep doing what you were doing, because I'm all about the challenge, and I love taking on challenges and like having to learn the crazy stuff that I have to learn now about being on the water and, you know, lights and day markers and channel markers and all that stuff. It's nothing like doing a wire attack or, you know, shooting a disruptor or doing a demo. So it's been good, and it took me a while. It took me a couple months, but I would say for the first time since April, May, I actually can say for the last 2 weeks I've been in a good place. So
Good. Well, it definitely sounds like you're starting to adapt and switching gears, and that's kind of been a common theme for a few people. Is
Yeah, so thanks. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So yeah, all that stuff's really interesting. I kind of had my primary reaction was, I wish human beings were like lobsters, where they would be forced to actually go handle that and shed that. But unfortunately, in some ways, and fortunately in some ways, we can find a different pathway, right? We can go with denial. We can go with avoidance. We can go around the issue a lot of times. We can bury it. And so my initial thoughts are, boy, I wish it was like that, where you had to kind of like, it got so uncomfortable, you just had to go find that safe space and work it out and get a new protective shell and go back out there, and in that new beginning, so to speak. So that led me to a lot of thoughts about what we do in our own jobs and in our society and whatnot, where we tend to choose the path of least resistance. And how I started thinking about how different people, because everybody's different, how do we get ourselves and also help other people maybe see that sometimes the path of least resistance, whether that's, you know, for some people, maybe it's already been mentioned, you know, hitting the bottle a bit, other kinds of substance abuse. It can even be something that people think of as healthy, but it's taken up time and energy and allowing us to ignore what's really going on. So my thoughts are kind of right there. I've been sitting with that, and how can I be someone that can help someone grow in a way like the red lobster, but I'm dealing with people who have other options and they can just stay in that space and hide, you know. So those are my initial thoughts. I know there's a whole bunch of different directions you can go with this. That's why I like the video and the idea. You can really play off of it in a lot of different ways, but those are my initial thoughts. How can I be a vessel and helpful for others, to see that maybe it's time to go find the rock. Maybe I can be the rock, and have them time to put on some new skin.
And I'm just going to jump in, Steve. I want that to be answered at some point, whether it's in this conversation or later, because I'm right there with you, brother. What's the secret sauce? What's the takeaway from that? So thank you. I'm right there with you.
And again, listening to you guys talk, it did occur to me something, talking about how we can help other people, how we can be, and I think that speaks to who's on this call, is we're all used to being of service. Like that's the people who do this, is we want to help, we need to help. Like there's an overarching desire to go out and do that. And one of the things that I took from that lobster video as well is that the rabbi's talking about the pressure that necessitates shedding that shell, and that pressure is internal. It's completely internal. There is no external stimuli. It's an internal stimuli. So at some point, this is one of our own failings, probably everybody in this group has experienced this, is that there might be times where we cannot help. there isn't something we can do. It's just that stimula, that signal to go shed that skin, I think most of the time is something that has to come from within. And maybe the thing that we can do is direct people to pay attention to themselves. That maybe that's the thing that we need to do, is that we can't tell people to go shed their skin. We can't tell people where to do it, but we can say, maybe you need to look inside yourself a little bit and do some introspection. And that's a really difficult thing to get to. And you literally cannot force somebody to be introspective. So I don't have a good answer, but I just wanted to point that out. Is I think that we beat ourselves up because we think we need to help and we want to. And sometimes it's something that has to come from that person who's suffering or is feeling that pressure. So.
And that is incredibly insightful. And if you don't realize that up front when you're in an intervention or helping someone, you can beat your head up against the wall and get burned out and never want to do it again. So, you can lead them, you can get them into counseling, and then they sit down in the classroom for a week or so, and then they run off and disappear on you, and that hurts. You feel like, I let them down, But you're right. They have to have that internal locus to get better. But you can set the conditions for them and never give up doing that and hoping for it. But at some point, they got to take it over the finish line themselves. So that's a great point.
Some notes a second ago here about one of the examples. This guy did this study. He asked a bunch of volunteers to jump off a 150-foot platform into a net, and afterwards they asked them to estimate how long it took, and on average they were all too high by 36%, every single one. So that kind of says something about your view of things, right? So he went on to say their fear and focus make time seem to expand. So here's one tip: to live a longer life, scare the hell out of yourself regularly, which I think is a direct correlation to get that stress and realize it's time to molt and get a new shell. And do that because it's good for you. It's good to scare yourself once in a while. It's good to do the things that you maybe don't want to do right away because they're not easy, or maybe they're hard and they cause stress. But when you come out of that rock again, you got a brand spanking new shell that's all shiny and even tougher than the last one. There's a couple more lines I want to throw out here before I get off topic and start sidebarring myself. One of the best lines out of it is, we feel most comfortable when things are certain, but we feel most alive when they're not, which I think is a pretty awesome line that really ties to this. If this lobster never goes under the rock and never molts, he's never experienced discomfort, and you never really live a life that way. If every single one of us never would have started on the career path that we started on, think of how many friendships, memories, experiences, and everything that makes you who you are, you wouldn't have if you would have, nothing against people that stay in their hometown, but it's a very different life. And I wish more people would just get out a little more if they could. But most people are afraid to, even a simple thing. You don't have to travel across the world. Just go to, a different town for a couple weeks or couple days, whatever, somewhere different, People get so comfortable with everything that they don't ever challenge themselves. And that's kind of how I took a lot of this. The one other line before I wrap it up. If you're always on a life vest, you don't know if you can swim. So that comes into the pushing yourself to do that. And also at the same time, like Paul was talking about, we can help each other with that and ourselves. Remember, hey, okay, I think I'm ready to take the vest off and go for a swim, but I need people here to make sure in case things get hairy, I can get pulled out of the water and I don't drown. There's something else too. I was just trying to look up right when you called on me in Struggle Well, that talks about internalizing and externalizing. So looking at sources of stress, sources of trauma, sources of struggle, whatever it may be. When you continue to focus externally, you never really take care of whatever it is. And when you start to look internally, like we were just talking about, that's when you find your own personal strength and, you know, realize, hey, it's okay to ask for some help. It's okay for me to go to a place where I can be safe. It's okay to be vulnerable when I, you know, bust out of my shell, because I've got that rock to hide under, and that rock is my friends and family. And then when I come out the other side, I'm going to realize that I can do this. If I can do what I just did, I can do anything, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, so not really a personal take on what's happening in life right now per se, but I think probably because I'm about to molt, so I'd rather not think about it right now.
I'm there with you, Brad. I think, and Kramer too, we're heading towards that 20-year mark, and I know we talked about it. It's different when you reach 20 and it's kind of your decision than when something just ends traumatically. But I mean, looking at the world we're in right now, yes, we're looking at 20, we're looking at retirement pay and pensions. There's no guarantee all that stuff will still be here. There's some stuff going on that's like, okay, that pension may not be as secure as everybody thinks it is. And that's scary. It's okay. And something that was occurring to me is I think that with getting back to the lobster analogy, I think we as humans sometimes get confused about whether we are that lobster out in a hard shell or whether we're under the rock. That some people think that they're under they've got their hard armor on, and they're really just hanging out in their safe space, and that and they've never left. They've never truly experienced stress. They don't know what that stress really is. Maybe don't even know what it feels like to have that armor on, to be outside from under the rock. That some people just live their whole lives there. Brad was talking about traveling. I think going from an abstract view to a very reality-based thing, traveling is probably one of the biggest things, I believe, to grow for anybody. I think we've all been through some things a little more traumatic than traveling, but traveling by itself can be traumatic and does initiate growth because you're leaving where you've known, everywhere you've gone, and too many people just decide never to go somewhere else. And it's really super difficult to see anything from a different point of view if you've literally never gone more than a few miles from your home. I mean, I think everybody here's deployed. Just think about going to Afghanistan and rolling into a tiny village in your armored vehicle, whichever vehicle you were in at whatever time period. And those people have never gone further than 2 miles, further than they could walk or a motorcycle could carry them. And they're angry and they want to blow you up or whatever, but there's no comprehension of what is beyond that radius that they live in. And we're basically aliens from a different planet. And the way that you resolve that sort of thing, and that is all stress-based, they're experiencing stress as well, is to go out and realize that there's more. There's stuff out there.
Yeah, hey, I'm really glad you brought up what it looks like for them. And I kind of you spurred a question, and that's if most of us agree, according to the video, that the stimulus for the change, for the growth, is the stress and the discomfort. If we can pretty much agree on that, is it safe to say that the opposite of that, comfort, the longer you stay in comfort, the more stunted growth becomes?
I'll jump on that one, man. So, my intention was not to retire when I retired. I was going to do like another 5 to 7 years until I met Lily, and that changed things up because I realized, excuse me, sorry guys. I realized I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing. I'm on autopilot. I got a good gig. I was doing my thing, but she motivated me to want to do something more and something better, and so. Jeremy, you went through it with me. You were at my side the whole journey, when it was going on. So, I think sometimes it's the other way around. You push yourself to be uncomfortable to move to the next level, and there's a lot of self-reflection that's involved in that. And just Paul, just to touch on what you said, because I'm you know, I'm basically Anthony Bourdain Jr., you know, travel erases prejudice. And I've seen that, you know, in all the countries that I've traveled to. You know, the more you get to know other people and you see how much you have in common with them, and that we as individuals are really not as different as we think we are, that really opens your mind and opens your horizons. I mean, you know, the first time I went to Asia, and now I've gone over 20 times to Asia. I mean, I thought it was another planet, like you described, you know, Afghanistan. Now I'm more at home there probably than almost anywhere else, because you get to see what common values those folks have, and you know, what values they have that you would like to emulate, because it's not something you experienced at home or in your upbringing or in your life itself. And you're like, hey, wow, this is something I would like to bring into my life as well. I think getting to know people and traveling and sitting face to face is really the key to growth in my mind as well.
I'll take a shot at Mario's comfort question, because as Paul was talking, definitely, you know, as you're rolling into town all kitted up in this foreign land, looking all badass, maybe that is the default setting that people got used to and love the most. And maybe stress for them is trying to fit in, you know, working a job at ADT installing, you know, home security systems, or, you know, working at Lowe's or whatever they're doing to get by. And maybe the thing that gives them the most discomfort is not being able to be over there and do that impactful thing, where the eyes of the world were on every op. Like if you messed it up, you know, you're that strategic airman or that strategic corporal that just turned the whole tide of the war because of something that you did, right? Comfort of being out of harm's way and having like a regular job where you can see your family and come home every day. To some, and I apologize to those that this may trigger, but the grocery store scene of the Hurt Locker, I'm sorry. I mean, that one scene captured it for a lot of people out there that just can't reintegrate.
It was the most accurate part of the movie.
Right? I mean, so no, those are all really, really great tie-ins to the thought I had before. Like, okay, so what? So what? So how do you do that? How do you overcome it? How do you grow? Right? So yeah, thanks. I'd like to hear from Diana. She's been kind of quiet.
Said no one ever.
I
Yes.
yield my time to the
Senior
Senator
Rogers.
of California.
Yeah. So actually there was several things that, like, when Brad told me about this video and I went and watched it, like, it reminded me of, you know, like growth moments in my life that were like incredibly uncomfortable and against my will, but also very needed. And to kind of touch on what Steve was saying, like, to be that, you know, how do you be that rock, that place where somebody can go and, you know, grow out of their shell. I would challenge you guys that I think sometimes we get used to doing, and sometimes it's just being that person that somebody can call at 2:30 in the morning, you know, when they feel like their world's been turned upside down, and you listen without judgment and things like that. And that sometimes just doing that can be your safe space. And then kind of like talking about the self-medicating, like I went through I had this like realization, not everyone has it. Like I had gone out with friends during that period of my life. We went to a concert. It was super cool. It's called Cashed Out, and they're a Johnny Cash cover band, and they're awesome. If you ever get the opportunity, I highly recommend. But like the next day, I realized, like in my hungover state, that like, oh, when I'm out and I'm drinking with my friends, I don't feel the discomfort that I feel every day when I'm sober. And like, so I realized that maybe drinking at all was just harmful and would take me down a dangerous path. So I stopped for a good long time, just knowing that that's a recipe for disaster. And then I took notes on the video, and I've been kind of like taking notes on something Jeremy said I thought was interesting. And it kind of reminded me, like, there was a point when I was going through it where I wanted the pain to stop. And I wished all that stuff had never happened in the time, right? But then on the back end, when I had achieved, when I'd gotten through that and like, you know, shed that old shell and came out from under my rock, and I was ready to reintegrate with the world. And it was, I wouldn't change it. Like, as painful and as uncomfortable as it was, I wouldn't change it, because it made me who I am today. And it brought so many great people into my life, that, like, I just can't imagine life without them, or experiences without them. Like, that is what, honestly, it's what propelled Paul and I to be stationed, to be stationed together. And like, I can't imagine that. That's such a huge part of my life, Paul. Shout out to you. That I'm grateful I went through all of that to get to where I am now. And I don't know, it's super powerful. Really good stuff. Good pick. So, steps off soapbox.
So that's going to be a really tough one to follow. But I did have some thoughts that kind of popped up as far as people being hesitant to leave that rock. And I just jotted some things down. Fear of rejection. You know, have I peaked in what my consequence to the world is? And essentially, I'm thinking now, like, should people be asking themselves what are their own motivations for feeling that way, right? Like, why am I scared? And if I'm scared because I think that other people should see me a certain way, or I'm worried about what other people think about me, whether it, you know, am I successful? Am I this? Am I that? Right? I think that those should be shut away, right? Like, you shouldn't be worried about what other people think about you, and don't let that be the motivator for your decisions. And if you're stuck in this comfort place because you're too scared to go out and take a risk, and to fail, you know, and to worry about what other people will think about that failure whenever they come to learn about that failure, I think that can kind of just box you in, right? To want to stay in that comfort place and not want to get out from underneath that rock and just go accept some risk, right? And I think that we're pretty we're not exactly risk adverse in what we do, right? We take, you know, risks just to go down range, right? Try to keep those calculated as far as how much we're going to assume. But I think that you know, in the military, one thing that kind of helps us out is that we have to take some pretty serious risks along the way. But I will say that it was much easier for me to do, you know, IED ops in country than it was for me to come out of the closet. Hands down, right? There was a lot of risk that was involved in doing that. But really, I was my own worst enemy in that whole thing, because I worked myself up to think what other people would think of me whenever I did that. You know, I had all these catastrophic thoughts in mind as far as how that would turn out. And every time that I do that to myself, you know, whether accepting these types of risks that I'm talking about, personal risks, I'm pretty wrong most of the time as far as what I anticipate how other people will react to that. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
So you actually made me think of something. You know, it's not easy to admit and talk about that stuff. About how your misperceptions of fear, they were wrong most of the time. Why do we perform so well in one situation and have such a hard time on the other one? And I think this is so important because during COVID, it's affecting more and more people. And that, I have certain theories, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Can I throw something out there real quick? I think that this, and as soon as Jeremy said it, to me, it's two different situations. One being a team situation, one being an individual situation. The individual situation is way more terrifying than being with a team. If you're out there on an op with a team, you can take on the predator, right? But once you're by yourself and you feel like you're by yourself, that's when things, I think, feel like they get worse. And that's why like groups like ours here and the community at large are so important. And when people remove themselves from those groups, we need to bring them back in to the best of our ability. Just a thought that I had that when Jeremy was talking.
And before you go back, Jeremy, I know you're going to add to this, but I want to share a quote. I wish I could mention the name, but
Hey,
we're not allowed to
Brad.
mention names. But it's Thomas Fuller, and there's been a lot of different iterations of this quote, but it's basically when you said team, right, versus individual. You know, in a team or with a group or with friendships, you divide your fears, your griefs among that group. Everybody carries a little bit of that for you. And when they also multiply the joys, right? So there's these intense highs and these lows that are shared with others. And exactly what you said, when you are not part of that team anymore, you don't get to multiply or divide that stuff anymore. It's on you now. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's like,
Hey, can I jump on that team thing? Two things that like saved me through what was going on a few months ago was Jeremy recommending that Excommunicated Warrior book, which was absolutely spot on with kind of how I was feeling and left out and not a part of things anymore. And then finding you guys and navigating what I was going through with you guys, and it definitely, like, I think when you work in a team setting for as long as folks like us have, and you do your decision by consensus and you rely on a number two, or you're the number two to a P1, or however you put it, and then all of a sudden you don't have that support system, things get weird and things get difficult to navigate. And you know, I put a lot of credit in where I am now as compared to where I was 4 months ago, to Jeremy inviting me into this group and making me part of this team, and to that book about how you need to find your own way sometimes when you're not part of the team anymore. And just my 2 stupid cents.
To backpedal a little bit on what you were talking about, Brad, as far as, and you as well, Mario, as far as what's that difference between you know, being a team lead on an IED op versus these personal things that we're talking about. And I think it comes down to control, because I can control a scene, right? I can control my team, I can control my own actions, and I have a pretty good idea of what the results of that's going to be. Whereas, you know, to backpedal back to that, you know, me coming out of the closet, I had no control in that. So that was terrifying to me, right? So I just wanted to add that as well.
Jeremy, not to like sidebar, but did you find that when you did come out of the closet, like that your reception was one of love, or like was it positive?
It was overwhelmingly positive, where I anticipated it would be the other way around.
I thought it was beautiful just when you came out of the closet. Like, it shocked me. I was like, oh my God, so many little things make so much more sense now. But I was just so like happy for you, you know? So sorry.
No, thank you.
yeah, I remember that day too. Like, you go, boy.
Now, one thing that I will say in that coming out process is that I kind of did it in a phased approach. You know, I didn't just wake up one day and blast it out on Facebook. I accidentally came out to a couple of friends, you know, had some drinks one night, and I think it was just eating me alive, right? And so it slipped out, you know, during having some drinks. I told some close friends, and I had a little bit of success with that, right? Like, I didn't have that anticipated response that they would turn their backs on me or, you know, look down on me or anything like that. It was actually quite the opposite. So then I just slowly started growing that circle, right? And experimenting with coming out to different people, and it was just all positive, right? And then finally, I just worked myself up to the point where I said, okay, screw it. I'm just going to throw this out there on Facebook, and now it's really out there, right? And I will say that process did not happen in a matter of a couple of weeks. That process happened over probably an 18-month period. It was a very long process of me debating with myself how I would go.
What was the stimulus for you feeling pent up and you had to say somebody? Was that the shell? Was that the discomfort?
Honestly, at that time, I was pretty suicidal, and I got to the point where I was tired of hating myself. I was kind of at a breaking point as far as which direction is this going to go, and there would be days where literally I would just come home from the shop and I would just be in tears, right? And I'd be drinking a lot. I'd have a gun in my lap. Like, I got pretty close, right? And then I'd watch like YouTube videos of other people's coming out experiences and kind of surrounded myself with that to kind of give me that shred of hope as far as how that would go. And then, down the road, like I said, I think it was just eating me up so bad that it just slipped one night, and I told a couple of really, really close brothers, and woke up the next day and I was like, man, I think I did this. I don't know if I dreamed it or not, and so I followed up with them and, definitely did it, so, but to my surprise, they didn't like go around and spread the word or anything like that. They were really good about keeping it close hold, which was very much appreciated. And again, the whole time I was freaking out that I didn't know how the shop would respond to it. I didn't know how other people would respond to it.
Was this before or after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed?
After. Yeah.
So the repealing of that, did that play a factor into your decision?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I wouldn't have done that if that hadn't been repealed.
Right.
But it was not, those two events did not happen very close to each other.
Oh.
Again, I think I just got to a point where I was just lying to myself about a lot of things as far as, what am I? Very much in denial about the whole thing. And again, at the root of all that, whenever you peel the onion, my number one concern was what other people would think, to include like mom and dad, right?
I think that's a fair question to ask with the policy change, because I think we should, looking at other situations where it's time for change, sometimes we just look at the person who has a problem. There's an external environment too that plays a huge factor, and that could be like an economic issue. It could be, as Paul was saying, you guys are all getting close to your 20. You're thinking about what am I going to do next, or maybe you're even past 20 and you're like, what's it going to be in that different environment? That will play a huge factor in the individual choices that you decide to make. And maybe the time isn't right in that environment. You have to leave that environment to go to a safer one. Whoever talked about that before, it reminded me of the psychological safety of a group. Surrounding yourself with people who can let you come out of your shell, right, and start working on yourself. So external environment, where it may not have played a role this time, but it's something really we should think about. Like, if someone's in distress, a friend is hurting, and you're talking to them, don't look just internally at what they're going through. Find out what the setup is like around them. The
atmospherics.
Yeah, the atmospherics is a good word. Like, what is the job situation like? Are they a place where they're happy? Their family life, all these other things. Environment, it just kind of keeps going out and out, further and further, and different. geocentric circles. And maybe you got to fix something way out there first before you can deal with the one that's in close. You know, something to think about, as I always say, right, Jeremy? Something to think about.
This is Wilson again. I've got a question for the group, for people who are helping other people or seeing other people or themselves going through things as well. First off, I'm a super nerd. So as soon as we started talking about fear, I just have to say fear is the mind killer because the new Dune movie's coming out. Sorry if nobody gets that. But the next thing is having gone to other formalized counseling things, has anybody else experienced where you go to something and you just can't fit in? I can definitely fit into this group, which I'm grateful that you guys invited me, because being here and not being with other bomb techs or other real people that I feel are in the military, even at a staff position, I have felt disconnected. But has anybody experienced where they're going to something and you're in this room and they like to do group therapy and you're sitting there and everybody's doing their thing and you've been through some stuff and you're trying to work through it, and you hear this group of 10 people around you and they go around the room and they describe what they're going to, and you just look at them and say, what are you talking about? Like that's junk. Just go home and deal with that. And then you feel bad because you're like, oh, that's a real struggle for you. Like, you're here because maybe you're even suicidal, but you're suicidal because somebody told you couldn't go to the bathroom or something. And like, what? Literally, that was a thing. Not to call out people's names because I don't know the person's name, but it's like, and you're sitting there thinking, man, I've had all this other stuff go on and I feel like I'm kind of dealing with it okay, but maybe I need a little extra help. And then you hear this whole group of people who are just, how do you deal with that internally? Because that's a tough thing for me, and maybe that's an empathy thing. Maybe I've become so hard-hearted that I don't have as much empathy as maybe I used to. And just asking the group, like, if you've experienced something like that and how that made you feel and how you got through it.
I just try to remember in moments like that if, like, to them, that distress is very real, and that trauma, even if it's something small, is very real. And I try to put it into, like, you know, they've never experienced anything more traumatic than that. So for them, that's a huge deal. And I try to look at it from that perspective. Because I sometimes can be a little bit insensitive, like, you know, get your shit together, or like, oh, you think that's tough, but like, it's okay to feel that way, but I would caution against like letting it come out of your mouth to that person, because like then you start comparing, and that's how you end up doing the silver lining people, as Brene Brown would say. You know, I would just say it's trauma's relative. Some people, like, you know, the last time I PCS'd, when I left North Dakota, the guy that was, and this kind of goes into the never leaving, right? They never leave this comfort zone. They never leave their hometown. They never experience anything worse than, you know, a stub toe is a terrible example, but there it is. Anyway, so like the guy that was packing up all my household goods, at one point he made the comment that he was 4th generation Ward County and that he had never left the state of North Dakota. Like, so just think about what a narrow, like how small his aperture is as far as like life experience. Like he's never felt any discomfort from leaving the state or leaving the country. And that isn't, like we were talking about travel earlier, there is going to be discomfort associated with that. And when you make yourself uncomfortable, even if it's just a little bit, like that provides a little bit of a growth moment, and it allows you to open the aperture, and you know yours gets wider, and you start having a greater understanding, like especially if you travel to some of these more impoverished countries, like Chris was talking about going over to Asia, like, going to Laos and Vietnam and just seeing how poor some of these people are. And yet, even in this extreme poverty, they're still incredibly generous. And it really, I don't know, like I said, it broadens your perspective. And so to kind of circle back and close it out, I think I just try to remember that everything's relative. And if they're fourth generation Ward County and they've never left the state of North Dakota, they don't know discomfort and trauma and stress maybe the way that we do, because they are, God, their shell is fear, and they're not willing to break out of that shell. They're afraid to travel. They're afraid to try new things. These are the same people that'll beat up, like they'll line the block to go to Sonic, but they won't try a new restaurant that maybe has some unique cuisine or whatever. So there.
But Dee, you brought up something, and I'll just stop after this, but that came up because I agree. We have gone around the world, a lot of us, and seen these things, and you see people in Laos are really kind and really generous a lot of times and happier a lot of times. And then you see these people from like North Dakota who have never left and have lived relatively comfortable lives who are super unhappy. And it brings up this whole idea, like, what is it you're so unhappy about? Like, that person in Laos is super happy. These old people sitting there drinking Lao Lao and sharing it with you and having a good old time and eating some ducks and whatever else you're doing that you found. And they're seem good to go. They're doing life. And then you run into people who, as near as you can see, have nothing to be upset about, who are all borderline on the edge of things. And it's weird to think about that. Maybe comfort is bad for you.
Well, I think comfort and comparison. I think we, as going on a branch, this is a personal theory. I think Americans are comfortable, right, in general. And I think we compare a lot. Like, it's real easy to look across the street and be like, oh, my life would be better if I had a bigger house, if I had that car, if I had this. And, actually it was like the personal trauma that I went through. And then, of course, I go to Laos, and then I get back from Laos, and I had a short notice to go to Vietnam. And I was in Vietnam for a while, and as a result of that, and then I was deploying, and I put all my stuff in storage, and then I get back from this deployment. I'm just, renting a room with basic necessities from a friend because I was PCSing, and I wasn't going to see my stuff for almost 2 years. And then when I get to North Dakota, and I get an apartment, and it's empty, and it's me and the dog and an air mattress, and I call and I'm like, hey, I'm ready for my household goods to be delivered. And they're like, oh, it's going to be 8 weeks because we're so backed up. And I was kind of bitching to a friend. And I was like, oh, I won't get my stuff for 8 weeks. And he's like, it's just stuff. Like, if the house caught fire tomorrow, what are you going to take? What are you going to take? What goes? What's the most important thing? And I'm like, oh, Maggie, my computer and my hard drive with all my photos. Maybe my camera if I can get it. But if I can't, like, it's all replaceable. Maggie's not. And that was such a powerful thing for me to understand. I realized how much I can live without by not having my things, by not having all of this. And I think when we look around and we compare our lives, like, I think it's real easy on social media too. It's real easy to look on Facebook and all you get is the highlight reel about how great, like, I see your beautiful baby. And it's like, oh, look at, like, their life is so perfect. But like, what people don't see is like, you're getting puked on and peed on, and a baby's waking you up in the middle of the night, and you're probably not sleeping all that great. Like, but we don't see that part. Like, same thing, you see people's big old houses, but you don't see that they're stressing out on how they're going to pay the mortgage, or that they're in debt up to their eyeballs. I think we compare way too much, and we're always looking at what somebody else has. It's a real dangerous mindset. I realize it's totally, I think we're like straying off topic, but.
All right. So Paul, I have a philosophy on that I've carried with myself for a long time, is that the soul is like any other part of the body, right? So, like 10 years into the job, I blew my knee on a call, right? My knee was not as strong and as well exercised as the other guys that I worked with, so I got hurt, right? Some people's soul is not as well exercised and not as well cultivated, so trauma affects them differently, right? And as you go on in life, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean exposure to trauma strengthens your soul, but mindfulness strengthens your soul. Spirituality on different levels, support systems strengthen your soul. So if I believe, as a personal philosophy, that I see people that have not seen the things that I've seen in my life that are struggling and are saying, I have PTSD, I have this, I look at them as someone who probably hasn't cultivated their soul, doesn't have the strength in their soul that other people around me do that don't suffer from these things, and so it affects them on a different level, right? So it like I blew a knee, and you know Steven looks like he works out quite a bit, so he probably would not experience the same physical trauma that I would. But yeah, there you go. Look at them guns. So so the soul's the same. Look at D. So the soul's the same thing. If it's well cultivated, but all souls have a point where they'll break, right? So at some point, something will affect anybody, even the strongest bodybuilder tears an ACL. So that's my personal philosophy that I wanted to share with you guys. Thanks.
Well, I kind of I experienced a lot of those empathy issues soon after. Basically, I would come back from deployment and I would have empathy issues, right? A lot of those connection issues and seeing other people as people. And I think a lot of that was just what I had done to myself to mentally protect myself, right? Like if you're in an environment where you're sustaining loss and stuff like that, it's just easier to disconnect from people and then it doesn't hurt as much, right? As far as sitting in groups and comparing, their stuff to your stuff, yes, I did the same thing. But after a while, I just kind of had to, why am I upset that their story does not compare to my story, right? And at the end of the day, I just kind of had to tell myself, nothing about mental health is a competition, right? Like it's, as everyone said, it's all about a person's perception and what they're geared up for. I mean, if we were all on the same playing field, I suspect we'd have a lot more EOD techs in the world, right? I think that we have a resilience that's much higher than your average threshold of person. But yeah, I did that, but a lot of what helped me find empathy was through love, loving other people and becoming more connected with other people and my thoughts. Like Chris, you got into that a little bit as far as, just trying to kind of reconnect and, ground myself with, just being present, if you will. But I would say that love in itself really kind of just pulled me back away from that callous, cold feeling that I had for such a long time. That and just practice, right?
I love it, man. General Hal Moore mentioned that too. He used to speak at their West Point graduations, and talked about everything they went through in Vietnam and everything, but love was the key. And to be able to look back at that in the later years and reflect on your life and where was all this bravado and stuff, and it really boiled down to that one simple word that you just said. But I also wanted to add to, we talk about the EOD thing, right? The EOD measuring stick of who's struggling more than me or less or whatever. And then we talk about EOD all the time. And I always like to think of, before I was EOD, right? I was just a kid from Indiana. Like, what was I like then? I mean, were we all EOD guys? Was Steve just born to be an EOD guy? Was, D born to be an EOD guy? I mean, we were
was
all
born to be EOD. I don't know about that Steven guy, but
Hey.
D definitely.
I think all of us grew to become EOD techs through
Right.
experiences, through training, through teamwork, through failure. Brad, from one of your videos. And then it was like this model that it just resonated with a lot of us that stuck around. You know, it didn't resonate with everybody. Some people early on was like, you know, this doesn't work for me. I'm tapping out. I don't get your culture. I don't get your weirdness. And besides, it's dangerous and crazy. So I'm out. But the ones who stay, like, we continue to grow. That lobster continues to cast off that shell and build a new one. And we just keep working on ourselves. But we kind of become very similar, like in our shared experiences. And then we have like some little nuances that helps us all. But we talk about ourselves as EOD guys. I don't know how many times people come up to me now that I've been retired. Oh, is there military before? I'm like, yeah, I was EOD. Dang it. Yes, I retired from the Air Force. My specialty happened to be EOD. That's how it like should roll off your tongue, but it doesn't. Like my life was EOD. That's how I define my 30 years in the military. When did that happen? Like, and what is that? And I never thought that, you know, Jerry Shelton from Shelbyville, Indiana would become the person I am now. Like, so I could have grown. I wonder what I would have grown into had I not had this network, this support group that we have, this going out to the range, lining up in gun trucks and heading outside the wire, all these experiences and all these losses and all these wins and the camaraderie and the fellowship and the love. And I don't know about you guys, but whatever that is, maybe that's a little closer to the secret sauce I've been talking about. Like, how do we keep spreading that around and to people who maybe don't have an idea of what that must be like? Is there something equivalent that we can relate to them who haven't walked the walk, right? So when we're talking about sitting in a group of people, like how many times you've gone home and visited family and, nieces, nephews, or, some of them are just like, I have no idea how to relate to this person. I can't tell a story that they would understand. I can't ask them a question because it maybe triggers something. It's just like two separate worlds almost.
You in the face and realize you're traumatizing them.
Right. I'm like, I wish I could just tell them, you have no idea. Come check out EOD guys in a group, and you'll probably think this is the most like amazing woke group of people that you would ever want to meet. Like, we are so not the rigid military thing that you have in your mind. We're just critical thinkers. We're open. We would like to rib each other a little bit. I mean, it's just, that was never, Jerry Shelton in 1982 would have just been intimidated by this group right here. But this is my world now. I can't exist any other way, right? This is the group that I grew into, right? So anyway, a little bit of a long grandfatherly rant, but take it for what you.
So Wilson,
go ahead, Paul. Bring it home.
Yeah, this is one of those things.
Sorry.
I like all the other stuff and the aspects of other professionals, especially emergency responders or really anybody. But I think one of the things that differentiates EOD, and this is not only to EOD, but to a certain subset, is, and we brought it up before, the teaming aspect of our job, is that the teaming aspect, we are so reliant on our fellow EOD techs, our fellow members, that it's forced. We have to do that. So we are problem solving, but we're not problem solving independently. That the best of us problem solve as a group. And that in a lot of those other professions, it's a little bit more independent. It's a little more independent. You get your police officers, yes, they work in groups together, but a lot of times they're off on their own. You can't send an EOD tech off on their own and do much. I mean, we do it occasionally, but you're not going to get nearly as much out of them. Whereas other professions expect people to operate independently, whereas we must team to complete our function correctly.
Okay.
And,
hey, let me throw this word at you now. You said team a couple times, which is spot on. I'm going to throw family in there.
Yeah.
Do you think a team like ours has like almost a familia to it? Like we have the apprentice, we have the the aunts and uncles,
Yeah.
it's a little like even more so than a team. It's more like a
Oh,
family. The connections, as he said.
I
you
hate
know?
to bring up something that might even make me cry again, but Brad published the speeches from Team Lima's memorial way back when, and my own was exactly that. Was the feeling of that they were family. Sorry.
And they
So-
are. That's
so
the thing. It's
you,
it's that love. It's that family. It's that mutual respect.
We should all listen to each other. We should all talk. If we have more communication and more connection, like Deanna mentioned there in the chat, we'd be a lot better off as a country. There's a lot to gain from everybody. That's kind of my take. But you know what? You know what is right is if we all connect, and if we all stop immediately trying to blame other people for everything wrong with America, and we just connect, I think America would be a hell of a lot stronger for it. So I want to connect with other people. I would hope people want to connect with us because we want to connect with them, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'm just thinking about it. Like we're comfortable with each other, right? And maybe we are each other's rock. And you know, we've talked about transition. Chris, you shared a little bit of your story. Mario, I mean, a few of us have already transitioned out. I think that's part of what makes it so difficult to transition is that we are each other's rock while we're in. And leaving that rock behind can be a very scary thing. You know, I thought that it was an impassable thing personally.
So having that family, you know, the extended family, right, to be there to catch you on the other side. You know, I remember Jeremy was active duty. I'd been retired for a while. We're still communicating, like, you know, if we were back at the flight at Kadena, you know, on hey, I got something came up. What do you think? You know, and I really think one of the important things for us to take away when we're talking about growth and how to help each other in the community is to be there for each other. Don't just let it end at your ETS or at your retirement date. You know, find a way to stay plugged in to whether it's actively reaching out to a couple of people once in a while or just making sure they know, here's my phone number, hit me up.
So, I mean, I think Brad, D, and I, like, getting ready to shed the military shell in lobster speak, put on a different one. What about those people who want to shed that entirely and not come back to the military at all? Like, don't even want to talk about it? I don't know if I'm going to be one of them. I know that people do that. People just disappear from this sort of thing. Is that healthy? Is that not healthy? Like, some people don't want to even, after they're done with this, never even think about it again.
I think that's just a personal choice, Paul, as far as, you know, and it's probably motivated by people's experiences, whether those were good experiences or not. And not necessarily just between people, just, you know, military in general could be. But I would equate that to just a personal decision. Something that I was thinking about, Mario, while you were talking, is that each and every one of us made a choice today to get on here and interact with each other, right? And Mario made a decision to go out and engage with other people and put this together. This didn't just happen. It required effort, you know? And so for people that are transitioning out, I would say, you know, don't expect people to come to you. You might have to reach out to other people as well, right? And just take matters in your own hand. That's where I'm going with it, is that nothing's going to be handed to you, right? It's just you're going to have to make an equal effort to stay in touch with people.
Just so you guys know, Lily napped through this entire conversation. I'm just gonna throw her under the bus right now. She's out cold. So
I'm really thankful for everybody to show up. Paul, it was nice to have you. And I'm really thankful you felt comfortable enough joining us, especially with your little ones. I think that's pretty cool. I love the videos, the pictures, Chris, that you're taking people out fishing, and Brad just posted a new video that I finally just got around to yesterday. You guys, thanks again.
Stay healthy, stay happy, everybody. Love you guys.
Word.
Love
See
you.
ya.
It's time to go get some lobster to eat.